Welcome to Spirits of Whiskey. We explore the wide world of whiskey through the many colorful personalities who make it, promote it, write about it, and more.
With each podcast, Corry Moynihan, a certified bourbon steward and bartender, and yours truly, Philip Dobar, director of the Cocktail Collection, interview whiskey's most important names.
From high-profile makers, blenders, and ambassadors,
to out-of-the-way innovators and remote pioneers.
Join us as we discover the people and elements that give the water of life its spirit. Happy New Year, everybody! It is Whiskey Wednesday, January 5th, 2022, and this is episode 55.
Today on Spirits of Whiskey, our guest is Louise Mc Guane. Louise is founder and maker at JJ Corry Irish Whiskey, a bonded whiskey, which, as we shall learn, is an exceedingly rare thing these days. Louise, welcome.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I greatly appreciate it.
Yes, welcome. We're so excited to have you. It's been a long time in the making, this interview, actually. So as we always start off, we love to find out about your whiskey journey. So when you were a wee little lass, did you ever have aspirations to be running a whiskey distillery as an adult?
Not as a wee little lass, no, not necessarily. You know, whiskey.
That would be strange.
Yeah, that would be slightly illegal as well, maybe. It's interesting because when I was younger, Irish whiskey wasn't particularly. It was kind of in a down cycle. You know, there wasn't a lot of Irish whiskey companies at the time.
Three makers.
There was 3 makers at the time, yeah, but there were hundreds of brands, interestingly enough, and you know it was just a down period for the industry. But my career started off. I just went out of college and then bang went into the drinks industry pretty much immediately out of university, and loved the industry and never ever wanted to leave. And it was kind of,
but it was the corporate side, not the mixology side.
Yeah, an extreme corporate side. You know, really like, you know, this is like the late 90s, early 2000s. So, yeah, it was extremely corporate, big multinational corporations that work you very hard.
Diageo, Pernod Ricard, Moët Hennessy.
Yep.
I mean, they don't get bigger.
They do not get bigger. Met some great people. But one of the most interesting things was that I always, you know, I was born on a farm here in Ireland, and, you know, every alcoholic drink that you have that's worth its salt, particularly whiskey, is ultimately like an agricultural product. It's going to be made from a thing that's been grown. And throughout my career, I always stayed very close to the makers. Like, you know, I worked on a very big Russian vodka brand and Stoli. And I remember going to the wheat fields in Tambov and literally going to Tambov and going to these huts and meeting the farmers that grew this wheat for this vodka. And that for me was always like one of the more interesting parts of the job. You know, there was a lot of spreadsheets and a lot of internal politics, but I was always drawn back to the wheat fields or the agave fields, or, you know, where the stuff was made. So after 20 years of doing that really hardcore corporate stuff, I just had enough of it. Like, it gets really old after a while, and you end up.
I'm sure.
You end up being not a very nice person, I think. So I didn't like what like my whole vibe, like what was going on. So I decided I would quit very dramatically and start my own whiskey business.
Are you still in recovery, or you know, are you nice now, or?
You know what? I'm really nice now. It took me about 20 years of corporate America, or corporate multinational corporations. It'll take you a good 6 months to kind of deprogram from. And yeah, it's nice being an entrepreneur because you just don't care about what anybody thinks or says, really. You know, you can just be yourself. And turns out I'm a nice person, actually.
Yeah, on
that's
behalf
kind of what
of
I
America,
say when I'm busy on television shows. I get very unpleasant, is a good word.
I can attest.
So, but yes, I can totally attest to the busyness of corporate type.
Yeah.
So
enough,
tell us
yeah.
why whiskey? Why not vodka? Why not tequila? Why whiskey?
Since you had touched all of these categories in a deep way.
Yeah, and champagne as well. I cut my teeth on champagne, you know, and that's a pretty fantastic category in and of itself. Why whiskey? Well, I worked for, I worked with the Johnny Walker brands and a lot of those really, really sort of Talisker and all those really kind of big guys throughout my career. And again, it was always back to basics with them for me. I was doing like big sales and marketing stuff, but the favorite bit for me was meeting the people who lived in the tiny villages up in Scotland, that made this stuff. And they really kind of reminded me of where I came from. Because I was in a big corporation, you kind of get to see what's going on in the world, the drinks industry world, and you get a lot of kind of things come across your desk. And I had watched pretty closely the craft whiskey scene in America begin to blossom and grow. And as we know, that's exploded in the last 15, 20 years, let's say. And that hadn't happened in Ireland, but I had a feeling that we were probably on the cusp of it. This is about 2013 when I started to kind of look at it. Jameson had done a really good job in kind of making Irish whiskey relevant again, essentially, and reintroducing it to a lot of people. And at that time, there were still only 3 distilleries in Ireland, and this is 2013. This is not a long time ago. And I saw a business plan for a distillery called Dingle kind of came across my desk somehow. I don't know how it landed on my desk, but it landed on my desk. And I thought to myself, okay, that's interesting. Like Irish whiskey is on the rise. Jameson have done a great job. This craft, independent kind of spirited makers thing is on the rise. People are interested in, stories about whiskey and who makes it and different approaches. And I just kind of felt in my bones that like that's a thing that's going to happen. Like the craft whiskey movement is going to coincide with the rise of Irish. And if we're really lucky, we might see a renaissance here. So I decided to jump ship because you get one chance in your life to do something like what I'm doing right now, which is be a part of the rebirth of an entire whiskey industry. Like we basically almost stopped making whiskey for 100 years. Only a few people made it. And now there's over 40 of us in the space of a really small period of time. So it was a bit of a no-brainer. I'm also Irish, of course, and I have a farm in Ireland. So Irish.
I had no idea.
Yeah, Irish whiskey, Irish champagne, Irish vodka. It wasn't a hard choice.
Got it.
So what part of Ireland is your farm in?
We are on the west coast of Ireland. If you look at a map of Europe, we are the farthest west bit of Europe, essentially, and in a place called County Clare. We have a pub here in County Clare, and it's known as the last pub before New York. Because if you go out the back of the pub and jump in the ocean and swim, you'll hit New York. Like we're extremely west and right on the coast. It's everything that you think of when you think of Ireland, where I live. Like it's coasts, it's cliffs, it's castles, it's green. It's very, very beautiful part of the country.
It's been dubbed the Wild Atlantic Way, yes?
That's exactly it. We're right on the Wild Atlantic Way, and it's very appropriately named. It really is rugged and wild and right on the edge of Europe.
And you grew up there on a farm.
I did. I grew up here my whole life, very small dairy farm. My dad is 80 and he still farms the farm. Just like has, yeah. I wish he wouldn't, God help us, but like he does. And so it's this farm that I'm on here. Like my grandmother was born on this farm essentially, and I'm not a farmer and my brother isn't a farmer. So another impetus for founding the business was the farm kind of needs a future, and I needed to secure it in some way. The Irish are very attached to their land. Like we don't sell our land. We're weird about it. So I figured this potentially could be a home or a base for the business, and it secures the farm for the future essentially.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so are you growing any of the grain there, or just still doing the dairy stuff?
No, it's all dairy here. It's still dairy. All we have is an ever increasing amount of rickhouses, basically, that we're building here. That's kind of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just lots of rickhouses, a big blending room as well. But it's a lovely environment for whiskey maturation. Being right on the coast, it's quite a nice maritime climate. So grain doesn't grow very well this side of the country because it's too wet. So the yields on barley and stuff like that are woefully unpredictable. And corn, my dad remembers corn growing here when he was a kid. just over on my neighbor's field, actually. But again, you'd never get enough output for any, or guaranteed output really for any kind of, decent production. You'd always have to be buying it in.
You couldn't do
Right.
industrial production of spirits.
No, you could grow some, you could grow token amounts of grain here, but you would never, but then you're going to get a big storm in July and it's going to ruin the crop every 3 years. It's not great crop. This side of the country doesn't grow crops particularly well. The Midlands is where you get most of the Irish grain from here, and up north a little bit as well.
Mm-hmm. Where it's comparatively protected.
Correct.
Sure.
Yeah, we're too coastal. It's too wild Atlantic way. It just doesn't, it just doesn't work that well.
Yeah, I just
want
to.
Have any peat bogs in that area?
I have a peat bog right here on the farm. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic!
Yep. So
wow.
We use. It's really interesting. Like Irish whiskey would have been peated at one point, like way back in time, and the reason for that is we use it as fuel. Like we still use it as fuel. My parents,
right? It's not a flavoring agent. It's a byproduct. That smokiness is a byproduct of the production.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you'd be smoking you might be firing your still with it 200 years ago, or you're malting your barley, or you're drying your grain, or whatever grain you're using, wheat, or whatever it is at the time. It's just going to be a byproduct, and there's loads of it. Like we have, as I said, to this day where I live. You go to the bog every summer and you harvest your peat. We call it turf. And then you bring it home and you burn it as fuel for your house. So we do have a peat bog here. That's good fun. I have a distiller that I'm working with up north, and we're running a few experiments with using our peat to malt some of his barley. Wow. And, there's local kind of aspects that we can use like that. But yeah, it's interesting in Irish whiskey, you're going to start to see a lot more peated varietals of it coming out, because in the middle of this whole resurgence of Irish whiskey, people are going back to the old ways and the traditional ways of doing things. So you'll see some kind of a return to that has become synonymous with Scotch.
Speaking of which, bonding. That is an old Irish tradition. It was common in the U.S. as well, once upon a time. In fact, we interviewed master distiller at what was Anchor is now Hoteling, and we in discussing with him, how they adopted Hoteling rather than something else. We got the whole backstory on a whiskey bonder by the name of Hoteling.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. San Francisco.
Yeah.
So talk to us about this. Why bonding? Why now?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to this idea of the Renaissance of Irish whiskey. So I'm in an extremely privileged position I was one of the first new independent makers of whiskey on the island of Ireland, back in 2015 when I started my business. Again, there was still at that time maybe 4 distilleries making whiskey at the time. And of course,
Teeling had come online by then, I think. I mean, Cooley had come and gone and had closed by the mid-90s, I think, had been bought out.
They were bought out and they recommenced production. Teeling was coming online around then. They weren't quite, they were coming online. Dingle was coming online. They might have been producing, but nobody in 2015 would have had 3-year-old whiskey. Like to be
sure.
Wouldn't. Right. They might have been producing. But I was going to open a grain to glass distillery. That was going to be my unique and amazing contribution to the industry. And because that's what one does 5 years ago, that's what one does. And I have a farm, obviously. And to your point, the reason I know a fair bit about grain production here is that I really did look into it. I was trying to figure out, what can I grow, and et cetera, et cetera. And as I was looking into whiskey production here in County Clare, I looked at all of the archival information I could find, from all over the place, basically. And through a lot of word of mouth as well. There's a lot of handed down knowledge in the people that live here, because the people that live here, their families have lived here for, 800 years or whatever. So as I was kind of snooting around, I was looking at there's an old distillery site that kind of closed down during the famine in our local town of Kilrush. At one point, there were 4 distilleries in County Clare. All of them were extinct by 1870, we'll say. They were, about 1870, they were all gone. And they had kind of some of them had brief runs. But the one thing I did find was this guy called Corry. I actually found this label that somebody was selling on the internet, on eBay. and it said, everything goes back to eBay, doesn't it?
Yep.
So, and it was this guy locally who was selling these labels. It said J.J. Corry, Whiskey Bonder, Kilrush, County Clare, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, that's
Is that the pink label that's on the website?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay.
And I called up the guy who was selling it, and I was like, yo, what's this? Please tell me about this, because I want to set up a whiskey company, and I'm looking for what's this all about? Who is this J.J. Corry guy, and what's this whiskey bonding thing? And I started to really delve into this idea of whiskey bonding, and what the hell is that? I'd never heard of it in the context of Irish whiskey, certainly. And, then I went into the rabbit hole of the British Parliamentary Archives, because we were, of course, ruled by Britain for a while, and discovered that whiskey bonding was once like a really integral part of the industry. It was the predominant way that whiskey kind of made its way to people back up until about the 1930s. And in the context of Irish whiskey, what it means very specifically is that if you were J.J. Corry, there was loads of J.J. Corrys, there was Paddy Malloy's, and there was loads of these J.J. Corry types. And he had a little shop in the town of Kilrush, and he sold bicycle parts, musical instruments, ammunition, guns, dandelion wine from Bordeaux, rum from the Caribbean, tea from India, all of these Commonwealth products. And
a not so general store.
Yeah, like anything. And he also sold his whiskey. And in the case of his whiskey, he would kind of take whatever casks he had lying around in his shop, most likely. So if he had that empty cask of Bordeaux or sherry or port, and he would bring it to the local distillery. And the nearest distillery to us at the time was Limerick. And Limerick and the town of Kilrush were connected by a steamboat that came up and down twice a day. So my assumption is that's where he got his liquid from. And he would then mature that whiskey for however long, there was no laws at the time, he would mature that whiskey and then sell it under his brand name, J.J. Corry. And that's what a whiskey bonder was. It was somebody who did precisely that. They had whiskeys from different distilleries, casks from different places, and then they blended whiskey then to create their own kind of style. So I thought that was interesting, and I thought that's, whiskey bonders were in every town in Ireland. If you drive around Ireland, you'll still see the term whiskey bonder written in gold letters over a lot of pubs. And that's, it's very much kind of in the ether. It's very much out there, but it had totally died out and been completely forgotten as part of the industry, because the industry effectively collapsed in the 1920s and 1930s. We went down to having one distillery for a small period of time. So when this market correction came around in the industry, I thought, okay, everybody else, there's a lot of great folks I know doing a grain to glass distillery. That's wonderful. I can't grow any grain anyway. So I'll become a whiskey bonder, and that'll be my kind of contribution to bring that tradition back to the industry. So that's why I chose it.
Wonderful.
Wow.
Wonderful. Well,
that's very cool.
You could have distilled vodka from whey, but
somebody's already
I'm
done
glad
that.
You went, which is great.
That's way too boring, Philip.
Way too boring.
Oh, I did a Philip.
You did. And there are some great gins that are distilled from whey.
There are.
And indeed, some of them are Irish.
There are.
But but we're glad you went with whiskey.
Yes, we are.
So
otherwise, we wouldn't be talking to you today.
Indeed. Can we talk about the actual juice? Like, what's in the market? What, how long has this stuff been laying up?
Yeah.
And what's available globally? What's available in the US? Our audience is global. So they'll want to know what's available, generally, not just in the US.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very good time to be a whiskey bonder, because as we've said several times now, when I started the business, there was 3 distilleries in Ireland. And that would have been very boring, just sourcing whiskey from 3 different distilleries and blending that all the time. Boring. Now there are over 40 distilleries on the island at various different stages of construction and production and things like that. So my goal as a whiskey bonder is essentially to have the biggest library of Irish whiskey flavors on the planet, the most diverse library of flavors. And correspondingly...
I love the concept.
Say that again?
I said, I love the concept, library, a flavor library. That fires me.
Yeah. We're really kind of it's a beautiful goal to work towards, because whiskey's all about flavor and blending is all about flavor. And because we don't distill, I have what I consider to be a luxury of going out into the world, meeting all these amazing distillers, sourcing their new make stock, and then going out into the world again and sourcing casks to match that new make spirit too. So I'm able to build all these amazing relationships, not just with Irish whiskey makers, but with coopers around the world, with, you know, bodegas in Spain, with distilleries in the US, with wineries in France. Like, I have this lovely kind of library of you know, not just whiskeys to kind of work from in terms of imparting flavor. So we have whiskeys, to answer your question specifically, ranging in age from 0 all the way up to like 32 is the oldest whiskey that we have at the moment. Yeah, single malts. And anything that's older, that I have in stock that's older than 5 years old, is going to come from one of those 3 distilleries. It's either Bushmills, Cooley, or Middleton. Like, that's just a fact. Like, that's the way that it is. And then any of the younger stocks that I have some really exciting small scale distilleries that you've never heard of, that are doing really interesting mash bills. Like, as I said, bringing back kind of old forgotten mash bills, pot still, using, you know, really interesting wheats and different layers of grain and stuff like that. So I have already, I think I probably have the most diverse kind of library of flavors, but the goal now is to really double down on that. And
you're sourcing both new make and quote unquote pre-aged whiskey, correct?
I am. So the whiskeys that are on the market right now are predominantly made from the mature stock that we sourced. I bought a lot of stock back in 2015. We've started to incorporate some of the new make now, the younger 5-6-year-old, into some of it. Eventually, everything that we have will have been sourced when it was a baby, like when it was proper new make. But it's going to take 20 years for us to get to that point. That's just right. That's the nature of the business. But the products that we have out in the US, and the 2 kind of core ones that we have out and about, are the Gale and the Hansen. And yeah, that's the Gale. And this is like this is kind of our flagship blend. This is the first whiskey we ever came out with. And the goal with the Gale was to show that, again, this is years ago, this one when we started, that like blended Irish whiskey is actually pretty stellar. It's pretty amazing if it's done right. There's a lot of blended Irish whiskey out there that tended to be kind of younger stocks. So I used all of the older stocks that we had in our possession to blend the Gale, and we still use it. So the core of it is a 2002 and 2006 vatting of a single malt. Then it has a top dressing of 1991, that 30-year-old or 31-year-old malt.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of it is another vatting of grain. Like, it tends to be grain ranging in age from 10 to 14 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the Gale. 60% malt, 40% grain.
There's a really broad age range in this bottle.
There is, yeah. And there's nothing like the core of it is those much older malts, 2002, 2006 malts. So, you know, they're beautiful, fruity, fruit bomby kind of malts, and I think that's what the Gale tends to deliver. It's all of those lovely forest fruit flavors, kind of green apples, autumnal kind of ripe fruits that you get from an Irish whiskey. Really, that was kind of the goal here.
The nose explodes. Am I right, Carrie?
Yeah.
It just explodes. Now, I'm looking at the label: a blend of grain and malt Irish whiskey, as you've stated, matured in a mix of ex-bourbon and sherry casks. What's the proportion ish?
So all of the 1991 top dressing that we put in there is sherried, and it depends on the batch, but it ranges from like 5% of that to maybe 6% of that. Like, it's a little top dressing. But because it's 30 years old, it's extremely heavily sherried. You know, it's been sitting, you know, it's just sitting, it had its whole life in sherry. So it's bonkers.
Oh, that was my next question.
Yeah.
It's sherry matured, period.
This is delicious.
Yes, it's lovely. I think.
Oh my God. Oh my God. Carrie and I both.
That's fantastic.
We both abstained from drinking this ahead of time. This is explosive.
I don't usually, but I felt like
which is why I bring it up.
I needed to start.
This is explosive.
Yes, it's delicious.
My Lord.
Yeah, lots of layers and layers and layers and that go on. Big sort of like almost mango, whitestone fruit flavors in the mid palate. And then a lovely long, creamy finish that's coming out of the grain.
Wow, the tropical fruits. Oh, yeah. Wow.
It's got a nice little bite to it, but it's not overly hot or anything.
I'm done. You two can finish. I'm just going to go off with this bottle.
But we have another one.
It's that good.
It is really
that good,
yeah.
Louise.
I always come back to it. You know, I would say it was good, wouldn't I? Because I made it, but like this is the first.
Well, let's hope so.
Yeah.
Let's hope you'd say that.
We make a lot of whiskeys, make a lot of really small blends, and we'll do like Bonder's blends, we call them, and we've made tons and tons of those for customers. But I always come back to the Gale. Like it's what I want our house style to ultimately develop and be. You know, it's the pinnacle of that, I think.
That is a distinctive house style.
It is.
Distinctive, truly.
It is. Now we should have started with the Hansen, but we're backwards, but that's okay. But the Hansen this is fun, actually. This is really interesting because I love grain whiskey. And when I say grain whiskey in the context of Irish whiskey, it normally means about 70% corn, 30% barley. And that's approximately what this is again.
Okay.
This is actually the world's first, this was kind of by accident, but this is actually a blended grain whiskey. So the stock that comes in here comes from two different distilleries. I didn't really realize, but that didn't really exist in Irish whiskey. Normally you get single grain. This is what they call them. But because of what we do as a bonder, that's what we do. You know, we put different...
By definition, it's a blended grain.
Yeah,
sure.
by definition. So some of that is 5 year. It's a blend of 70% 10-year-old grain, thereabouts 10, 11-year-old grain, and then 30% 5-year-old grain. So some of this, as I was saying, this is some of this stock is what we brought in as baby whiskey, as I call it, and brought along ourselves. It was all put into really juicy first fill, Jack Daniels and a couple of other sort of smaller kind of bourbon casks, essentially.
Okay, all right.
So 46% ABV. We don't use any coloring in any of our whiskeys. This kind of tends to freak people out a little bit because they're expecting coloration, but I'm not a big believer in it. Don't love it. I just think it should be natural.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do too.
Yeah. No chill filtration. Same. I don't see the point. It's also very expensive, and I don't see the point of it. I'm not buying that piece of kit. We don't need that. But yeah,
this is going in a I'm cocktailing with this tonight.
Yeah, so this is tremendous in a highball, and anything kind of citrusy, even if you highballed it with at something that has a little bit of citrus in it, or a sparkling or soda water with some grapefruit, tiny dash of grapefruit juice and a bit of bitters, like it's really easy drinking. But it has lovely kind of lemon meringue pie or kind of key lime pie notes to it. That's what I get contextually for kind of the US.
I'm going to open a dry vermouth tonight and experiment with proportions with this and dry vermouth. That's it's be like a whiskey martini. It just because that's what I'm getting.
Yeah,
I'm getting. This is a compliment. I'm getting gin. I'm getting gin botanicals.
I was going to say I'm getting a lot of earthiness.
Explosion of spices, and earthy ones.
Yeah.
These are both delicious. You should be very, very proud of the products that you put out because they are fantastic.
Thank you. Yeah, the Gale and the Hansen available everywhere. If you just Google it, we sell direct in the US. We're all over the US, and we also sell online. So we're in quite a few countries. You'll find them, and the names are fun. I'm kind of a history geek as well as being a whiskey geek, and we always name everything at JJ Corry the names start with and the Gale is named after a bicycle that JJ Corry invented very randomly, and the Hansen
very cool. I noticed the bike on the back.
The Hansen is named after his son-in-law. His daughter married a gauger, a guy called Gauger Hansen, whose job it was to go around and tax the whiskey bonders, essentially. So he just used to go around and make sure they were all paying appropriate amounts of tax. And they used to wear little bowler hats, so I put a little bowler hat on the back.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very nice.
Oh, I just
Very
love
nice.
it. I love the bottles. I love the labels.
Mhm,
I love the whiskey.
Yeah.
I'm just in awe.
This
This is a great way to start the morning.
Are there other expressions about to hit the market?
Yeah, we have a single malt called the Flintlock that we do. We do it once a year. It sells out really fast. It won, I'm not a big awardy person, but it was one of the first ever independent brands to win like the Irish Whiskey Awards, like best single malt. And we do a pretty limited run every year. And it's about to come to the US again, like in limited amounts, probably by St. Patrick's Day. Again, it'll be online.
Oh, good.
Yeah, it should hit it. And that's really interesting because it's this year's version of it. It's a 16-year-old single malt. It's only about 4 casks, and then we vatted them all together in a manzanilla cask from Spain, essentially, just for a final couple of months. So it has those beautiful, big, sort of rich, bold fruit bomb flavors of JJ Corry, and then like a little kind of touch of jasmine going on from the manzanilla cask in the end. It's like really interesting. And that again is kind of us showing, like, I work very closely with a cooperage in Spain and a bodega, in Spain as well on these kind of projects. And that's kind of the first foray into that. But it's called the Flintlock. It has a gun on the front, and it's called the Flintlock because when I was renovating the barn here dates from about the 1700s. It's now our tasting barn.
Oh, wow.
A pistol fell out of the ceiling. Somebody had hidden it there about 300 years ago, and it just fell from the ceiling. So,
wow,
those can still go off.
Yeah,
it was pretty busted.
Okay,
It was pretty busted.
Okay, because that would have been a good story.
Well, I don't know.
Well, depending on how it ended. All right, that's an annual release. So generally, there are 3 SKUs in the market, one of which sells out. Are you planning to have eventually a family of like 9 to 12 in the market at any one time?
Yeah, eventually. Like we did a really fun project called the Battalion a couple of years ago, which was a tequila mezcal finish, and it was awesome. And again, it sold out super fast. And I was going to do it again and make it a permanent addition to the portfolio, but COVID really messed up our casking plans. We couldn't get casks out of Mexico. Very simple, and I still can't get them out of there. So we'll probably bring that into the mix. And then what we do is every now and then we'll do a special release with like a whiskey club or a particular bar or account. So we have a cup, and they're very small. They're only about 200, 250 bottles. They're small runs, but we kind of develop them in conjunction with the bar or the account or the whiskey club, and we release those. So you'll probably see a few of those from us this year in the US as well. And we do them all the time over here in Europe. They're really interesting because they can get pretty crazy because we can go a bit wild on cask finishes and stuff if people have particular flavor profiles that they like. And they're very much in the tradition of whiskey bonding. That's what whiskey bonders used to do. Like if you were the local landlord family in Kilrush in 1890, you had your own housekeeper's blend. And that's just kind of a version of that, except on a more global scale.
You do bespoke bondings.
Yeah, bespoke blends. They're called bespoke bonders blends. 3 Bs, BBB.
Love it.
Very good, very good.
Not the Bed Bath and Beyond, though. No.
No.
What can I?
Where you go to break up with your partner,
and your coupons never expire.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, your coupons never expire.
What if one visits the farm? What can one expect to experience?
So it's pretty cool. Like, I think we're the only people who will take you around the rack house and you can open a cask and taste from the cask. And we have a program now where you can kind of blend your own individualized bespoke blend. So you can spend a couple of hours with us doing that. So it's a very...
Okay, what's the closest airport?
It's Shannon Airport.
Oh, Shannon. Okay, Shannon is closest.
And my cousin actually runs all the hospitality. It's very in the family. But it's a really nice experience because we don't it's by appointment only. You can't rock up with a bus of 400 people. You kind of have to book in advance, but it's just you get to see everything after distillation and all of that piece, which is really interesting that you don't usually get to see on a distillery tour. And it's very immersive. So yeah, look us up.
Will do.
Very cool.
Jerry and I have your cell phone number, so I think,
yes, we do.
Yes, I think we might be able to snag an appointment.
So how many employees do you have at the distillery?
So we only have, how many do we have here? They're all my cousins, so I should kind of know. We have 4 on site. So we have 4 people on site, mostly in production, basically. And we have 2, we have 2 off site, 1 over in the UK. This is probably a year of growth for us. The US is starting to become quite an important and big market for us. And we're kind of expanding, not nationally, but almost. So we'll probably be kind of scaling up a little bit this year. But we've been very bootstrappy since this whole thing began. We're not one of those massive guys who got 100 million from someone day one. Like, it's been very kind of take your last 10,000 euros and kind of start a business kind of thing. But this year we'll probably be adding a couple of people, I think.
So when you approached your family and said, I'm going to do whiskey, I'm going to be a bonder, I'm going to do this, did they all say, me please? Or you have to talk them into, hey, come on, I need help. Come over here. Let's do some work.
They all thought I was insane. You know, these people, it's this farming, like, these are farmers, they're farming communities, and there might be a bit of illegal distillation going on around here even today. But there wouldn't be a great love of the whiskey industry. My dad doesn't drink at all. He's what's known as a teetotaler. He's a he took a pledge when he was about 15 and never had a drop in his life. But he has been really vital. You know, I literally did start this here on the farm. I converted a cow shed on the farm, and that was my office. And I remember a truck one day just like pulled up on the farm, and it was full of bottles, and I opened the back of the truck and all these bottles just like fell out onto the ground. And I needed them for an order, like literally 4 days later. So there was no time to do anything. And my dad came over, and my neighbors came over, and everybody came over to help me unload this thing. And I've had a huge amount of neighborly help in the beginning, because it's a farming community, and that's what farming communities do, no matter whether you're making whiskey or milking cows. So yeah, I've had a huge amount of help.
Given the where your office sits, did you think of nicknaming it the Dung Den?
Oh, jeez.
No, it's a very cute office. I spent very many happy days there. God knows the shit pad, it could have been a few days, but like, I love that office. It's been great.
The shit pad, that's another idea.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Shit spell. That's what's like starting a business sometimes.
Okay. All right. Carrie, shall we cocktails?
Sure.
We end every interview with a discussion of cocktails, given what I do with a good chunk of my time, which is direct the cocktail collection, which, as you know, Louise, formerly known as the Museum of the American Cocktail. We don't ask what's your favorite cocktail, because for me that's and the only answer to that question is as if. But what are your go-tos? Do you have a go-to category? And also, how do you best like your product? Cocktailed. And if you're going to a bar and this is not on the shelf and you don't just leave, what do you order?
So I was really lucky in my career to spend a lot of time working on cocktails. I did this program with Diageo called World Class, and I got to work with some of the world's greatest bartenders, and I got to kind of learn a lot about cocktails. I'm still terrible at making them, but my go-to...
A number of those bartenders sit on our advisory board.
Yeah, like Dale and all those guys. Yeah, I mean, they're...
Charles Joly was the first to join.
Yes, like they're geniuses, So I have a great love and appreciation for other people making cocktails for me, because they're fundamentally better at it. But obviously, I mean, I have a whiskey company, so I'm kind of obliged to toe the line. And I do love a whiskey sour, but I love... I'll give it a bit of a twist. I'll add like maple syrup or agave instead of, as a sweetener. And I've started to really love a New York sour with a little bit of a red wine or a sherry float in it. I really
Mhm.
got,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
because I have a ton of sherry here because of all this sherry work that I do now. So love a bit of a float. God, I love a mint julep. And again, the reason is I have masses of mint out the back. So when I want to make these things, I just have to go around the farm and gather up what's a little, go out and get some
Mhm.
whiskey out of a cask, gather up some mint and like, do my business. So, yeah, love a good sort of whiskey shot sour, not a huge amount of sweetener in it. Love a Manhattan as well, those kind of classics. But if I'm not drinking that, I'm a Negroni drinker. But I've been a Negroni drinker before it was
Negroni, okay.
fashionable. I want to point that out. I've been drinking it for a long
Understood.
time. It's not a fad.
Understood.
I've been doing it for a long time, and I still love Negroni.
Your credit is good here.
Yeah.
Yes. That is a popular choice that people have said on the show, too.
Oh yeah, Negroni is very popular. That and a Boulevardier, which of course is
Yes.
a Negroni with whiskey.
Yes.
Yeah, wonderful stuff. I tend toward the black. I like blackening it with Averna or Cynar or something along those lines. Subbing for the Campari. I like that deep herbaceous complexity. I love Campari and Aperol, but sometimes I think they're just given what my palate wants. Sometimes just a little too aggressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love all that whole kind of subcategory though. Like I'm really into it. I think it is.
Oh, Amari.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. Like it's a great. Takes a bit of getting used to in your early drinking days, but like once you get into it, it always feels like a serious drink when you've got one of those going.
Yes. Ooh, an adult
Right.
beverage.
An adult
Yes.
beverage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
This has been fantastic, Louise. Thank you so much.
You've
and
been
thank you
wonderful.
for sending these samples. They're fantastic. And I don't think they're going to last long now that they're open.
we look forward to seeing this brand grow. This is,
Yes.
you're doing exceptional work.
Thank you so much for the time and giving us the airtime. And God, it literally has been about a year trying to make this happen with logistics and everything. So thank you for your patience.
Yeah.
I appreciate it greatly.
Of course.
We're very
It's
happy to have
definitely
you
worth
with
it.
us.
Worth the wait.
Yes, indeed. Louise Mc Guane, thank you very much. For show notes on today's podcast, please visit our website at spiritsofwhiskey.com. That's whiskey with an E.
We'll include links and supporting documents from today's stories in this episode's blog post.
As always, you'll see upcoming topics, a guest roster, and links to past shows.
Thanks for joining us.
Until next time,
Sláinte.
Spirits of Whiskey is produced by First Reel Entertainment and the Center for Culinary Culture, home of the Cocktail Collection, and is available via Anchor, Apple, Google, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are heard.